could an ordinary Tuesday turn into a scene from a war zone? Along Interstate 10 in Ontario, California, traffic crawled under a bright afternoon sun until a roaring Freightliner semi-truck smashed through the stillness. Within seconds, steel twisted fuel ignited and cars burst into flame. 3 lives vanished in the inferno. Witnesses say the impact sounded like an explosion. Flames climbed 40 feet into the air. Dash cam footage shows vehicles colliding like dominoes in a chain of chaos. Investigators quickly identified the driver, 21-year-old Jashanpreet Singh, an illegal immigrant from India who entered the United States in 2022. According to California Highway Patrol reports cited by Reuters, Singh was under the influence of narcotics. He never hit the brakes. The truck tore through stopped traffic, leaving 8 vehicles mangled and a once peaceful highway reduced to smoldering wreckage. The victims, a 54-year-old man in a Toyota Tacoma and 2 passengers in a Kia Sorento, died instantly. Others were pulled from the flames with burns and broken bones. Emergency responders described the scene as a corridor of destruction. By evening, Singh faced 3 counts of vehicular manslaughter and 1 count of driving under the influence causing injury. ICE immediately issued a detainer labeling him a high-risk fugitive. But beneath the wreckage lay a bigger question, one that has ignited a national storm. How could a man living illegally in the United States obtain a commercial driver's license, operate an 18-wheeler, and turn a federal highway into a graveyard? Officials in Sacramento scrambled for answers. The California DMV confirmed Singh held a valid CDL expiring in 2026, obtained through standard verification channels. Federal databases BBC News notes show his work authorization was renewed multiple times. Each renewal came with tacit approval from federal agencies. Bureaucracy had in effect paved the road to tragedy. As the sun set over blackened asphalt, investigators combed through debris for clues. Families gathered behind police tape, clutching photos of loved ones. Reporters broadcast live from the scene, their voices trembling as flames still flickered in the distance. The images flooded social media, a burning highway, a driver in custody, and a nation demanding accountability. Was this simply a catastrophic accident or evidence of a deeper collapse in America's immigration and safety systems? And if so, who will bear the cost of failure? In the days that followed, investigators pieced together the paper trail and it painted a damning portrait of systemic negligence. Jashanpreet Singh had no legal right to be in the United States. Yet according to The Guardian and DW, he managed to secure a commercial driver's license through California's DMV after presenting an employment authorization document approved by federal authorities. That approval had been renewed twice since 2022. California officials insist they followed the law, but critics see something darker, a web of red tape that let a dangerous driver slip through the cracks. As one state officer told Reuters, every box was checked, but nobody actually looked. The result? A man high on drugs legally behind the wheel of a 40-ton machine. District Attorney Jason Anderson called it a bureaucracy-fueled disaster. His words echoed across newsrooms and congressional halls. For many, this wasn't just about one crash, it symbolized the collision between America's safety standards and its fractured immigration enforcement. Behind closed doors, Homeland Security analysts quietly compiled data. Al Jazeera reports that at least 12,000 non-citizens currently hold commercial driver's licenses nationwide, many issued under verification systems that predate the Trump administration's 2024 reforms. Some of those licenses belong to individuals whose immigration status remains under review. In other words, they may be driving legally while living illegally. California's Governor Gavin Newsom defended his state, accusing Washington of politicizing tragedy. His spokesperson emphasized that Singh's license was issued according to federal rules, and that California acted lawfully under existing frameworks. But the damage was done. Public confidence in the state's licensing system collapsed overnight. Talk radio lit up with outrage. Hashtags like Nyach Highway Justice and Secure the Roads flooded YouTube and TikTok. President Trump's administration moved swiftly. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, speaking from the White House press room, declared, "This isn't about paperwork, it's about human lives. California ignored our federal safety mandates. Now 3 Americans are dead." Duffy immediately froze $40 million in federal transportation funding for California. The Department of Transportation accused the state of failing to comply with federal-level English proficiency and background verification standards. Those measures, part of Trump's 2024 executive order, were designed precisely to prevent cases like Singh's. Defense policy experts quoted by Jane's Defense Weekly noted that this move mirrored the administration's broader Homeland Enforcement Directive, a strategy aligning civil safety with national security. The message is clear, one analyst said. If states don't enforce the law, the federal government will use funding as leverage. As California and Washington traded accusations, the American public watched in disbelief. Was this just one rogue driver or proof that America's roadways were being compromised by its own bureaucracy? Each mile of asphalt now seemed like a metaphor for something larger, the fragile intersection of law, safety, and sovereignty. And in a nation divided over immigration, one haunting question lingered: when bureaucracy kills, who stands trial, the man behind the wheel or the system that let him drive? By week's end, the tragedy had ignited not just vehicles, but politics itself. What began as a fatal crash on Interstate 10 had evolved into a national reckoning, a symbol of what President Donald Trump called the lethal cost of open border negligence. In a fiery address carried live on BBC World News, the president vowed immediate federal action. "No one here illegally will drive commercial trucks on American highways," he said. "Not under my watch, period." Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy expanded the announcement. California would face a comprehensive audit of every commercial driver's license issued to foreign nationals since 2018. Federal investigators, he said, had already uncovered dozens of licenses granted without full background clearance. That ends now. Duffy declared his tone cold and deliberate. For supporters, it was justice. For opponents, it was political warfare. Governor Newsom fired back, accusing the administration of weaponizing tragedy. He claimed Washington's funding freeze was unconstitutional and vowed to challenge it in court. But Trump's approval ratings soared, especially among independent voters. A Reuters or Ipsos poll showed support for stricter licensing verification above 70%, even in traditionally Democratic states. Meanwhile, conservative commentators across the media spectrum amplified the message. Fox News described the crash as a direct consequence of California's defiance. Even centrist outlets like The Guardian admitted the optics favored the White House, a grieving nation demanding accountability, and a president promising swift enforcement. Yet beneath the headlines, something deeper stirred a clash between federal authority and state autonomy that echoed the old battles over border walls, sanctuary cities, and national security. Defense analyst Robert Kellerman told DW, "This isn't just about truck licensing, it's a test of who truly governs Washington or the states." Inside the Oval Office, Trump ordered the expansion of Operation Continental Shield, a nationwide initiative designed to cross-link immigration transportation and homeland security databases. By 2026, every commercial driver would undergo biometric verification through DHS, ICE, and state systems before renewal or issuance. It was the most sweeping federal transport security measure since the Patriot Act. The plan sent shockwaves through state governments. Texas, Florida, and Arizona immediately pledged cooperation. California and New York resisted, calling the order a mass surveillance scheme. But the public mood was clear. Americans wanted roads safe and those in the country illegally off them. In a symbolic move, Duffy ordered new roadside inspection protocols modeled after military-style readiness checks. Federal Highway Patrol officers began random verification sweeps at major transport hubs: Los Angeles, Houston, Atlanta, Chicago. Truckers lined up for document reviews, fingerprint scans, and drug tests. To global observers, the United States looked once again divided between federal muscle and local defiance. Al Jazeera framed it as Trump's internal border war fought not with walls, but with laws. Still amid the politics, the images from Ontario remained burned into the nation's mind: twisted wreckage, scorched steel, and families lighting candles by the guardrail. The story was no longer about one driver. It was about whether America could protect its people without tearing itself apart. As headlines blared and tempers rose, a chilling thought spread: had the nation reached a point where bureaucracy itself had become the deadliest driver on the road? The Ontario crash was not an isolated tragedy. As federal investigators dug deeper, a disturbing pattern began to surface. Across multiple states, Indiana, Florida, and Arizona, similar cases were emerging: illegal immigrants behind the wheels of massive commercial trucks, driving under the influence with licenses granted through loopholes buried in outdated systems. In Indiana, Reuters reported a 29-year-old driver from Punjab veered across lanes and struck an oncoming SUV, killing a young father of two. In Florida, a Mexican national made an illegal U-turn on I-75, colliding with a minivan and killing three. Like Singh, both men carried commercial driver's licenses legally issued under federal authorization despite their unlawful status. Homeland Security's statement, quoted by DW and Al Jazeera, was stark. These incidents reveal a dangerous failure of oversight. Criminal illegal aliens are operating commercial vehicles across U.S. highways. Every unchecked license is a loaded weapon. The Department of Transportation's internal audit confirmed the scope. Over 12,000 non-citizens held active commercial licenses nationwide, many verified under the old federal system that did not cross-check with ICE databases. Under the new Trump directive, these licenses would undergo revalidation through the Continental Shield system, a sweeping biometric integration linking every CDL to immigration records, drug test databases, and English proficiency certifications. Supporters hailed it as long overdue. The days of bureaucratic blind spots are over, said Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy during a press briefing. Public safety is not negotiable. But critics saw something else, a creeping expansion of surveillance. The Guardian described the plan as a vast digital dragnet, while civil rights groups argued it blurred the line between law enforcement and personal liberty. Where does safety end and state control begin, asked one policy analyst on BBC Newsnight. Meanwhile, DHS agents carried out the first wave of compliance raids. At truck stops near Dallas and Atlanta, dozens of drivers were detained for fraudulent documentation. In Los Angeles, ICE agents intercepted a commercial training center accused of helping foreign nationals exploit identity gaps to secure CDLs. The federal response was ruthless, but it resonated. Polls from Reuters Ipsos showed that over 70% of Americans supported the crackdown, cutting across party lines. Even in liberal enclaves, there was growing unease. The public mood had shifted from compassion to caution. On talk shows, grieving families recounted their losses. One mother, speaking through tears, asked how many more have to die before the government admits the system is broken. Defense news analysts drew a striking comparison. This is domestic security through logistical warfare, said correspondent Ryan McCord. Instead of drones or soldiers, it's data and enforcement. The battlefield is the highway. As Operation Continental Shield rolled out, foreign governments took notice. India's foreign ministry demanded consular access to detained drivers, while Mexico warned that mass targeting could strain diplomatic ties. Yet Washington remained unmoved. President Trump, addressing the nation, reaffirmed, "Every life lost to bureaucratic failure is one too many. We will restore control, road by road, license by license." The message was unmistakable. America was done negotiating with chaos. But as cameras panned over candlelit vigils and makeshift memorials, the question hung in the smoke-filled air: how far should a nation go to protect itself from its own systems? By mid-autumn, the political clash between Washington and Sacramento had erupted into a full-scale power struggle. Trump's administration framed it as a fight for national safety. California's leaders saw it as federal overreach. The tension wasn't confined to words, it now had legal, economic, and symbolic weight. Governor Gavin Newsom filed an emergency lawsuit in the Ninth Circuit accusing the White House of violating state sovereignty and threatening to bankrupt local infrastructure projects by freezing $40 million in federal highway funds. His team insisted California had followed every federal rule when licensing Sing, and that the tragedy was being weaponized to justify authoritarian policy. But public sympathy was fading. Reuters polling showed 68% of Californians sided with Washington's crackdown. A DW analysis described it as the first time in decades that California's liberal governance is losing the national narrative on safety. Inside the White House Situation Room, President Trump convened an emergency Homeland Security Council meeting. The footage from Ontario played on a screen. Fire screams chaos. This, he said, according to The Guardian, is what happens when bureaucracy replaces backbone. He signed an executive memorandum expanding Operation Continental Shield into Phase 2 mandatory biometric verification of every state-issued CDL coordinated by DHS, ICE, and the Department of Transportation. The operation rolled out like a military campaign. ICE field units dubbed it Road Sentinel. Mobile enforcement teams were deployed to ports, logistics hubs, and interstate checkpoints. Defense News reported that the Pentagon offered satellite analytics to track cross-border freight routes suspected of human or narcotics trafficking, a rare fusion of civilian and defense intelligence. At the same time, Congress erupted. Senate Democrats decried federal intimidation, while Republicans called the program the first line of domestic defense. Jane's Defense Weekly compared the political map to a battlefield every governor is forced to choose: stand with state autonomy or with national enforcement. California's resistance proved costly. Federal contractors paused highway modernization funds, and major logistics firms began relocating operations to Nevada and Arizona, citing uncertainty. Trucking associations once loyal to Sacramento shifted allegiance. Compliance is cheaper than defiance, one CEO told Al Jazeera. Meanwhile, the families of the victims were invited to testify before Congress. Their quiet words cut through the noise. Our loved ones died because no one checked the papers, said one widow. The chamber fell silent. Even critics of the administration hesitated. In the background, the world watched. European outlets like BBC and DW compared Trump's transportation security reforms to post-9/11 aviation measures, controversial but transformative. Foreign ministries from Canada and Mexico began reassessing their commercial licensing agreements with the US, fearful of reciprocal screening demands. And through it all, the political theater intensified. California officials warned of digital profiling while Washington spoke of digital accountability. Two visions of America stood face to face, one that prized freedom of movement, another that demanded security above all. The standoff became more than a domestic dispute. It was a referendum on the American social contract itself. Could liberty survive in a system that failed to protect its citizens? As protests erupted outside state capitals and truck convoys flew rival flags, one thing became clear: the war for America's highways had become the war for America's soul. Along Interstate 10, the melted guardrails still glint in the California sun, silent witnesses to a nation's failure and fury. Families gather each week to lay fresh flowers where their loved ones perished, praying that their pain might at least bring change. The air smells of burnt rubber and grief. The scene has become more than a memorial. It's a reminder that the debate over borders and bureaucracy now cuts through the very fabric of American life. For the victims' relatives, the arguments in courtrooms and Congress mean little. What they want is justice and answers. He was driving home from work. One mother sobs in front of a local news camera. He did everything right, but the system didn't. Her words resonate across networks, echoing in newsrooms from Reuters to BBC News. The human cost can no longer be hidden behind legal jargon. In Washington, the fallout transforms into policy. President Trump signs a sweeping reform bill, the National Transportation Integrity Act, fusing immigration verification with commercial safety oversight. Under the act, every CDL renewal triggers automatic checks through DHS, ICE, and FBI databases. Critics call it institutionalized surveillance. Supporters call it common sense. Either way, America's transport landscape will never be the same. Defense analysts at Janes and DW describe the new system as a hybrid model of civilian logistics defense, comparing it to NATO's digital verification frameworks for cross-border freight. Federal officials argue that biometric tracking and centralized data sharing are essential to prevent another Ontario tragedy, but civil liberties groups warn of an expanding government eye that could one day reach beyond the highways. Meanwhile, state resistance begins to fracture. Facing mounting public pressure and logistical paralysis, several governors reluctantly agree to comply with Operation Continental Shield. California, under federal scrutiny, quietly restructures its DMV verification process. A spokesperson admits to Al Jazeera, "We underestimated the depth of the loopholes. That mistake cost lives." Yet even with new safeguards, the deeper wound remains a trust deficit between citizens and the system meant to protect them. How many other licenses, approvals, or permissions hide unseen dangers? How many other Sing-like figures are already out there waiting for another red light, another moment of silence before disaster strikes? The debate spills into America's cultural bloodstream. Talk shows clash over whether Trump's crackdown is patriotism or paranoia. Editorials in The Guardian call it a necessary awakening. Reuters headlines read, "Security versus freedom, America's new line in the asphalt." The world watches as the US redefines its balance between liberty and control, safety and sovereignty. At sunset, the camera pans back to the scarred highway. The asphalt has cooled, but the questions still burn. The nation stands divided yet united by fear that tomorrow's tragedy could happen anywhere. Federal inspectors comb through truck yards, ICE agents cross-check biometric files, and somewhere a driver shifts gears on an open road, unaware that he is part of a revolution in motion. In the end, the Ontario crash becomes more than a headline. It becomes a turning point the moment America looked into the mirror and saw the cost of complacency. Laws changed, systems hardened, but the sorrow of 3 lost lives remains the loudest voice in the room. So as traffic hums once again down Interstate 10, one haunting question endures: can a nation truly call itself free if safety only begins after tragedy? The Ontario-California truck crash exposed the fatal intersection of immigration failure and regulatory neglect. The driver, an illegal immigrant high on drugs, legally held a commercial license, a revelation that sent shockwaves through Washington. President Trump's administration seized the moment, launching Operation Continental Shield and freezing California's highway funds for ignoring federal safety standards. Investigations revealed more than 12,000 non-citizens with active CDLs, prompting a sweeping national crackdown. As politics erupted, the tragedy evolved into a struggle between state autonomy and federal authority. New biometric verification laws were introduced, transforming America's transport and immigration systems. Families of the victims became symbols of public outrage, demanding accountability from both bureaucrats and lawmakers. By the end, the disaster had redefined U.S. domestic security policy. America chose enforcement over leniency structure over trust, and in doing so sparked a new debate over freedom itself.